Great. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for the edForce Citrix co-branded edTalk on app and desktop virtualization made easy. At edForce, we run edTalks as a learning-first conversation designed to help professionals make sense of technology that are shaping modern enterprises. Today's session is especially relevant because app and desktop virtualization is no longer optional. It is a foundational capability for secure, scalable digital workplace. This session is not a sales pitch. It's about learning, clarity, practical understanding. Whether you are new to virtualization or looking to strengthen your architectural foundation. Over the last few years, we have seen a shift. Hybrid work, remote access, security expectations, and performance demands have pushed organizations to rethink how applications and desktops are delivered. Today, in this set talk, we would focus on how app and desktop virtualization works in real world, using Citrix as the reference platform and breaking it down in a way that engineers and IT teams can actually apply. By the way, there's an Amazon gift card also for all of you. Just wait till the end. I'll give you the steps on how you can win it. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today's session, R. Gopi Kanan. Is a certified Citrix instructor with 19 years of experience across virtualization, EUC, and cloud platforms. Gopi is known for his architecture first approach, strong focus on real world deployments, and ability to explain complex concepts in a clear, practical manner. He has worked closely with IT, infrastructure, and EUC teams across enterprises, helping them design, deploy, and optimize Citrix environment that actually scale. Today, Gopi will walk us through Citrix app and desktop virtualization, focusing on CVAD 2402, LTSR architecture, components, and best practices. With practical insights you can take back to your teams. Over to you, Gopi.
Yes, team, everyone, I believe you are able to hear me and you're also able to see the presentation. Yes. Fantastic. So let's continue, guys. So it's mostly theory and possible in the last slide deck, I'll try to show some demo on the lab if time permits. So let's quickly go through what we are going to discuss here. So getting started with CVAD, Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop 2402 LTSR. That's a particular version of which getting some discussions done. So here, we'll go with the introduction of the webinar objective for 10 minutes. Then we'll get into the CVAD architectural discussion for 20 minutes. Site design and deployment considerations for another half an hour. Then we'll go with the workload provisioning concepts for another 20 minutes. Then we'll get into the user access and some experience management for another 20 minutes. Then once things are installed and deployed, most of the time we administrator need to monitor it and make sure that it is secure. And when issues comes up, if the question is never if, when issues comes up, how do we fix it? Some basic introduction on the tools that Citrix gives us. It'll take some 10 to 15 minutes for the question and answers. Usually the class is for 5 days or so. Here we are quickly going through a quick intro on each of these topics. Like any good course, we do have some prerequisites to understand what we are going to discuss. Like we should know what is an Active Directory is, what a server operating systems are, different ones. For example, difference between Windows 10 and the Server 2019. What are the different operating systems that we have from Windows? Different kinds of storages. What it means is if we say SAN, NAS, DAS, we should understand what they are at least. Networking, very basic understanding of networking is absolutely fine. Like if you know what is an IP address, subnet, LAN, VLAN, stuff like that. Uh, Absolutely no experience is needed for this introduction class to understand. If you have some working experience on Windows, not on Citrix, on Windows, that should be more than enough to understand what we are going to discuss. The first module will talk about the VDI versus application virtualization, some use cases for the enterprises wherein the product is used for mostly remote access, again on secured layers. Training companies can use to provision their labs, including colleges and corporates. Corporates, again, call centers, BPOs, contractors, bring your own devices, or major corporates can use Citrix to provide access to their applications outside their office in a secured manner. We will talk about particularly on 2402, one of the products from Citrix. Then we'll also see what is delivery controller, concept called as delivery controller, studio, director, storefront. So these are different components which makes up the entire product, including the license servers, let's say the control panel, the resource layer, and all the products listed here. We'll spend another 30 minutes or so understanding the pre-deployment check. So even before we go and install the product and configure it, what should be already ready in your environment? So that the product deployment or installation and post installation configuration is easy and it goes hassle-free. So like Active Directory, DNS, we'll also discuss what is the licensing concepts for Citrix. Can we have single site or multiple deployments? How do we safeguard ourselves against a single point of failure? We call it as redundancy or availabilities. Having multiple controllers or SQL servers, some common design mistakes that we can avoid. So we will have some half an hour discussion on that. Then we'll also look into a concept called as VDA. What is a master image? It's called as a catalog and a delivery group. Some provisioning methods, what we usually use in the industry. Then we'll talk about server desktop, server operating system, desktop operating system use cases. Then we'll get into how do we connect to these remote applications. A fantastic topic called as storefront and an application called as workspace app through which as users you would connect to the backend applications. Talk about it for another 20 minutes. Then we'll look into a tool called as Director, wherein people who are connected, their sessions we can monitor. You can see how long they have been logged in or any kind of login concerns. If there are issues coming up and when issues comes up, Director would be the one of the first tools to get to and collect more data about those issues so that as administrators we can fix it. And also get into role RBAC, role-based administrative access. How do we provide it? Some common admin tools like we have Studio, Director, the classic event viewer, PowerShells from Microsoft. So all of these tools which we can use to usually look into the logs for fixing issues. Maybe the last 10 minutes will take for some question and answers. Said that, let's start with the first topic. Let me just the 20 minutes, we'll get into a quick overview of the architecture of desktop apps and desktop virtualization. When we say apps and desktop virtualization, in the simplest form, what we mean is the backend servers we have applications mostly, or the entire desktop session itself, which users remotely need to connect. So instead of installing those applications on the user devices and managing hundreds and thousands of devices in the corporate environment, we choose highly powerful servers, the backend, wherein these applications are installed, and users, internal within the office or from outside the office, they are able to access these applications. And these applications would run in the data center, somewhere in the data center, but their screens are presented to the user to interact with. When they say interact with, using the keyboard and the mouse, you will be able to work on those applications, be it Word, SAP GUI, or let's say some application which is running the backend. Core components for this design to work would be something called as controller. We have Studio. So these are the topics that we will see in the further slides. Storefront, license server, the VDAs, architecture by layers. When we say layers, like any other vendor, even Citrix puts up its entire design into one page. So in one page, we'll see multiple components and how they connect to each other. So something called as a control page, wherein the data will flow, the resource layer, wherein all the applications are running, user layer, wherein the users are connecting from. So how do we differentiate different kinds of users? And on a high level, we'll see how the connection actually flows. Now, said that, we say intro to desktop. This is a page we are trying to understand. So in the backend, click out the screen. So in the backend, we have the applications running on some server operating systems or the desktop itself on to which the users need to connect. So these are the servers on which the Word, the PowerPoint, the Excel, SAP, PeopleSoft, some applications, some corporate applications are running. And these application needs to be accessed by the users who are within the organization or even outside the organization working from home or remotely. So when they would like to connect, they need to pass through multiple components. We call them as components. So Netscaler is a component. Storefront is a component. SQL Server, Active Directory. These are the consoles. License server is a component. Controller is a central component. So each of these component, which is in itself a server, so mostly a Windows Server operating system, except the Netscaler, will do a particular function in the entire traffic flow. So when the user wants to connect to the backend server, the flow needs to go through all these servers and how do they function to provide the access. Now that's what we'll try to understand within the next about 2 hours. So the CVAD solution gives the IT is us, the admins, the control on the virtual machines. So these are the virtual machines which are running on some favorite hypervisor of yours, VMware, Citrix, Azure Cloud, AWS, somewhere the virtual machines are running, which are again running some applications licensed. And securely, we need to provide the access to the users who are connecting from any device. So the whole idea is you connect from your mobile phone, your tab, your desktop, Linux and machine, or Windows machine, or Android operating system. Absolutely doesn't make much difference. So whichever device, wherever you're connecting from, we should be able to serve the user's applications running on some virtual machines, the backend. But that's the whole purpose of CVAD, Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop. So user gets to access their applications or desktop, which are running at a centralized service. These servers, 10, 15 years back, they were only confined to Microsoft operating systems. But over a period of time, we saw that Linux is also growing in the market, and so is the case with Mac operating systems. So the applications in the backend, they can run on Windows, Linux, or Mac OS. Mostly servers. Sometimes the desktop operating systems can also host applications, very specific scenarios we have, but it's possible. As administrators, we control which users will have what set of applications at what time. So only on weekdays, and if it is weekdays, within the weekdays at what time. So all of those configurations, all of those control, all of those authorization under the AAA, authentication, authorization, auditing, authorization part will be managed either on the Netscaler or on the delivery controller by us as an administrator using different consoles. So that's the whole idea at this point. I said that. Let's say some benefits of it. Superior experience. When we say superior experience, what we mean by that is compared to the competitors in the industry, we have deployed thousands of deployments and we have decades of experience. So we are ahead. We are one of the pioneers in getting the server-based computing and remote-based access. Started in 1990s, way old. So our experience gives us much wisdom to give good experience. Easier management, yes, the console over a period of time has evolved much, much better. With starting from the installation to managing the consoles. The 2 decades back, installation was considered to be one of the complex jobs in Citrix. But today, installation, anyone and everyone can do it. Just follow the guide and you should be able to do that. Management, back in those days, reading event logs and getting into any kind of logs and analyzing it and decoding it was kind of an art. Today, the event log is in a plain English, gives exactly what the service was trying to do, including where you need to look for a reference to Citrix article. Some CTX KB article, it gives us a reference. So from the management end, Citrix has done much better, like in most of the industry, how it has evolved. So once you get a hang of how the product actually works, how they are all connected, then it is obviously easier to manage. So What's stopping us is usually the unawareness of the product. Once you get aware, it's easier. Now, more secure access. Yes, as the industry is evolving on the security, back in those days, we used to secure on 128-bit encryption. Now, we doubled it almost every 5-10 years. Today, the industry standard is on 2048 to 4096. Some high-end industry, they are using encryption on 4096. Most of the industry is still with 2048. So we are giving a secure connection, end-to-end encryption and end-to-end secure access to the end users. So they are all connecting from the public internet. Now, better BYOD. Now, bring your own devices. We started this movement. The industry started this movement, I believe, almost 15 years back. But you need not own, the corporate need not own a laptop and give it to you and manage it. Instead, you get your own laptop or your own devices, and from your personal devices, you can access corporate apps. Some industries are still not going with BYOD, but most of the other industries has evolved with BYO devices. Long-term support. Now, there are two products in Citrix. One is called as CR and another one is LTSR. Now, CR is current release, so every 3 to 6 months, there is some or other new updates coming up because Microsoft is coming up with some new updates, Cisco is coming up with some new updates. There are some new AI technologies which is coming up. So the IT industries is very dynamic for the last decade or so. So to catch up with those changes, Citrix as a solution vendor, they need to come up with their own updates. So current release, we see almost every quarter or every 6 months a new release coming up. Now, big corporates will not be able to shift from one version to this current release version very fast, 6 months. So very, very short time for them. So for larger corporates, we have an LTSR version, which we supported for 10 years. And not all versions which are released are LTSR capable. So you need to look for a version which is LTSR capable. In our case, we are discussing 2204. Now that's LTSR capable. What it means in the simplest form is, let's say a corporate buys 2204, Citrix guarantees the support for the next 10 years. Even though there are multiple other versions released, we will support this version for a decade. So for larger companies, it's all usually advised that you look for the LTSR tag and then you buy the product. Smaller end ISPs, independent software vendors, or hardware manufacturers, you can go with the CR. That way, the latest features are released and you are up with those latest features because your business line depends on it. So two kinds of releases are there from Citrix. Choose the one which suits you better. Simplifying the management with components managed by corporate IT. When we say that we do have these components called as controllers, databases, licenses, licensing server. So these are all different servers doing different functions. Now, what functions we'll see it in the further slides. Management interfaces. We have a couple of interfaces to manage. So we have something called as Director, amazing tool to do an initial configuration. We have Studio. Nowadays, we are also getting a web-based Studio. It's another amazing post installation tool to do initial configurations, let's say. So for monitoring, we have another tool, VDAs. But these are the backend servers to which the users connect. We call it as virtual delivery agents. Any Microsoft server on which you install this piece of software, it's just called as Citrix servers. Citrix VDA servers. Purpose, host applications, which will be connected by the users. Now, you have to see all this in one diagram. But this is the diagram. This is the architectural diagram. We call it as layers. There are 5 layers of it. 5 layers beautifully distributes the entire architecture of the CVAD product. So we have the user layer, we have the access layer, we have the control layer, we have resource layer. Everything end of the day needs to run on hardware layer. Now, when you say user layer, what we mean by that is user categorizations. So we categorize the user by 2 methods. Either we trust the device from which the user is connecting, or we do not trust the device. Now, if we trust the device, those users are called as internal users. So the user themselves, it is the device which connects to the network. If you're connecting outside your office from the internet, your device is not trusted because you're coming from an internet, from an unsecured network, which the corporate doesn't have control. So if you're an external user, your connection should go through firewall, NetScalers, and other corporate security devices. So you'll have routers, you have L3 switches, and you have firewalls, you have anti-ransomware, malware, antivirus tools. So you have so many devices. But from confined to Citrix discussion, the traffic flows through our NetScaler gateway firewalls. So that will filter out the bad traffic. Now, once all the bad traffic is filtered, and we are sure that with the latest updates, that your traffic is clean without any kind of maybe cross-site scripting or any kind of DOS attacks or DNS-based attacks or buffer attacks. So there are so many attacks. We will do a deep packet inspection on the NetScaler device. And once the packets are clean, only then it's forwarded to the next hop. Otherwise, we simply drop the packet. Because the connection is coming from external, we do not trust external devices natively. So external devices are called as external users. Now, if you're within the office environment, yeah, the office environment is already secure. So compared to external users, internal user devices are trusted. So internal user connections need not go through the NetScaler devices, and you can directly connect to the web servers. So Storefront is that web server, which we'll discuss in some time. So either you trust the device, which is internal, or you don't trust the device, which is external. So accept a logic wherein even if you're external user and you're making a VPN connection, then you become an internal user, accept that exceptions. Otherwise, external user ideally means if you're outside the office and connecting, you're an external user. If you're connecting within the office, you're an internal user, your connection is trusted, that you can directly connect to the web server. So that's user layer. Segregate the users in two parts. As simple as that. Access layer. When we say access layer, we have two devices, two components called the storefront and the gateway. NetScaler Gateway is an independent product. It's an ADC, it's an application deployment, application delivery controller. It's a load balancer. It can act as a gateway, it can act as a VPN, can act as a WAF, that is web application firewall, or it can also act as an SD-WAN, depending on the licenses that you have given. NetScaler is, as I said, is an independent product. If you do not have a Citrix virtual app center desktop environment, still you can buy Citrix NetScaler as a feature product, what I just went through. It's a Citrix product, so we usually cross-sell the NetScaler into the family of products. If not NetScaler, we can use any other load balancers or gateway from the industry. But mostly you will see NetScaler being deployed. So again, NetScaler comes in different formats. You have virtual appliances, you have physical appliances, you have container-based specific appliances. Whichever appliance best fits your design, you can go and deploy it. Storefront is a web server. It's a Microsoft server operating system on which we have installed IIS. On top of it, we have installed a piece of software from Citrix called as Storefront, so that the users have a web page to interact with, to enter their credentials. And once authenticated, they would be able to interact with the applications as icons. So once authentication is done, users will be able to see the icons of their applications, click on it, and the application will launch. How it launches, we'll see it in some time. But the storefront is the interface, web-based interface for the users to connect to the backend applications. Now, whether to join it in the domain, you don't want to join it in the domain, we have different designs, but storefront and the gateway, because these two devices decide the access for the users, we call it as an access layer. It's a simple name. Then we have another layer called as control layer. In control layer, we have four components. We have the delivery controller. Again, delivery controller is a Windows Server operating system. Actually belongs to the domain. It's a part of a domain controller domain, and onto which we have installed a software called as a controller. This is the main server, which would be communicating with many components. So delivery controller will communicate with your storefront, it will communicate with your gateway, the domain controller to the SQL server on a particular port number, to the license server, to the VDA. It has 15 services. It connects with 15 different components. It also connects with the hypervisor, whichever hypervisor we have. So each of the services, there are a bunch of services. Each of these services connect to different jobs. So it's like a centralized component which connects to each of your infrastructure environment and then gives the solution wherein the users can connect to applications which are listed on your resource layer. Now, ideally, 4 GB or 5 GB is what it needs with 2 cores. You have some configurations. Ideally, more than one controller is what we will deploy, at least 2. Then we have a domain controller. I mean, most of the time it is Windows domain controller for taking care of radio AAA functions. Mostly your first one, authentication. Authorization also under different ways. Whatever is happening is logged. That would be your auditing. Then all the configurations, what we do as administrator needs to be saved in some kind of table, some kind of database. We support SQL database. Very old versions, we used to support Microsoft Excel, Oracle databases and all. No more. That was way old. Today, it's only SQL for POC, small environments, we can go with SQL Express. Otherwise, large organizations, you can go with some addition of SQL, the SQL Enterprise or SQL Basic, but only SQL. Then you have a license server. License server is also mostly a Windows operating system on which licensing is installed. It needs IAS for the management purpose. To install it, and that's where the licenses are held. Licenses is how Citrix makes the commercial benefit out of the product. We need licenses. We do have some logics on the licenses. We'll see it in, I think, another half an hour. We'll quickly go through that. So that's control layer. Not be able to spend more time on it. Then we have the resource layer. As the name itself suggests, the resource layer. This is where you have the server operating system, mostly server operating systems on which applications are installed. Your Word, your PowerPoint, your Excel, your Adobe Reader, etc. And they are categorized into 4 types. It can be mostly a server operating system, as I said, or it can be a desktop operating systems. There are 2 variants of desktop operating systems. One is called as an assigned desktop. When you say assigned desktop, if one user gets access to that desktop always, today, after the break, tomorrow, 10 days later, whenever the user logs in, the user always logs in to the same desktop. And it's called as an assigned desktop. Previously, we used to call it as static machines. Different versions over a period of time, we give new names. The whole idea is to one user, one desktop operating system is assigned permanently until as an administrator, we go and revoke it. So that's assigned. Random machines, as the name itself gives away, it's random in nature. So user 1 connected now to a random machine. He was working on it. He went for a break. He logged off, went for a break and came back. There's no guarantee that the user would again connect back to the same machine because machine is random in nature. You might connect to a different machine, whichever machine at that time it was free. So randomly you connect to those machines. So call center employees or those users who do not need to make any changes on the OS level. Your random machines, and most of the users are in that category. Users who would like to make changes on a particular operating system or their application license is tied to that a particular VM's hostname or MAC address or some unique IDs. Developers, engineers who like to install and do some testings and who need dedicated resources. In those cases, we can give assigned desktops. There are multiple cases. These are the ideal immediate cases where the decision as a top level administrators we make which desktop to be assigned to whom. Then we have remote PC. This is a remote PC. What it means is back in our office, building number 1, 5th floor, left wing, I have my desktop DSK 005, just beside the pillar. That's where I sit when I come to the office. That's where I work. But that local physical PC has Outlook, okay, and let's say PeopleSoft application installed. Today I'm not in office. I'm working from home. So I'm an external user. I'm working from home. Now from home, I can access 10 applications. Out of 10 applications, 8 applications are hosted on the servers and the desktop. I'm able to access it absolutely fine. But these 2 applications, Outlook and PeopleSoft, now they are installed on the physical desktop. Back in my office, DSK005, beside the pillar, okay, my desktop, which is assigned to me. Now, how do I access it? Either I need to go to the office, or if the VDA agent is installed on that physical machine, and obviously it needs to be switched on, then it will get connected to the controller because controller is the central server. So even from home, I would be able to launch the application on my physical PC back in my office. That's something similar to other remote tools, what we get it like TeamViewer or AMI or AnyDesk. So something similar, but corporate VDA from Citrix. If you are able to connect it, obviously through the NetScaler like this, then that kind of design is called as remote PC. If you have such applications and if the solution demands this kind of access, possible. The whole idea is it is possible. whether you would like to use it or not, case to case. Is that? And all of this runs on some big powerful hardware. The hardware industry has also matured a lot. 15, 20 years back, we used to have only two CPUs, dual core processor, quad core, octa core, hexa core. Today, I think we have more than 50 core. And that to much, much multiple times powerful, 4 times, 5 times, 10 times powerful than those previous generation of processors. So 50 core, logical, 100 core, two processors, 200 core. So average, we have 200 core on each rack service. Storage, we used to have 8 GB hard drive, 100 GB hard drive. Today, we have 20 TB hard drive. And I believe there is a 50 TB hard drive which is released. Just need to check on the internet. So on a single server, you can have, say, if I have like 12 bay, so 50 TB into 12 bay, now that's around 600 TB. Entire data center used to have 1 TB 20 years back. Today, one rack server has 600 TB. So highly, highly consolidated. Memory is also highly consolidated. 4 GB, 8 GB RAMs are all gone. Today, there are RAMs which are 1 TB RAM. I believe there is a 2 TB RAM which is also coming up. 1 TB. Like that, we have, let's say you have 18 slots. 18 TB of RAM you can put it in one rack to use servers. So the servers are highly consolidated, and you can run hundreds of virtual machines. Sometimes you run more than 1,000 virtual machines on a single host. So these are all called as host. And because they are so highly dense, highly dense servers, especially you'll be running things on virtual machines. So you can have hypervisors. Your favorite hypervisors. We are open platform. Now we are not open source. Open platform means we are not tied to a particular hypervisor. You're a VMware shop. You already have VMware ESXi. Absolutely fine. Go deploy Citrix solutions on VMware. It absolutely works. You would like to go with Hyper-V? Fantastic. We work on Hyper-V. You have KVM, Nutanix, OpenStack, CloudStack. We work. You don't have a hypervisor. You're thinking about it. Why not use Zen server? We call it a Citrix hypervisor now. Zen server. Give it a try. Amazing solution. All from the same family of Citrix. We all are highly integrated. Who use it? Give it a try. Graphic cards can also be virtualized nowadays. We do have a different class of graphic cards. For example, we have it from NVIDIA. We have Tesla model, and from AMD. I'm unable to recover the name, but you do have a class of graphic cards which are virtualization capable. Network cards. Gone are the days of 100 MB, 1 GB, gone 10 GB. Today, average, you have 10 Gbps speed. We have 40 Gbps. We have 400 Gbps copper cables. Amazing speed you get in. And these are all not a normal card. These are all smart cards, okay? DPU based, which is the network card has a processor and a memory chip and a program on it. So the RX, TX virtualization, they are capable. They do all their VLAN and VXLAN overlay, all this advanced networking. Everything gets processed on the network, not only a CPU. The hypervisor just takes the virtualization and gives it to the network. So amazingly fast. Because you need to run hundreds and thousands of workloads, right? Such huge high density hardware when we have, the network also needs to be equally strong or equally fast. Can't be a bottleneck. Wi-Fi is just an option. If you usually deploy the servers in retail shops, like Reliance malls or branch offices, then we might put a Wi-Fi as an extender, but otherwise on the server, we don't have a Wi-Fi. So that the hosting platforms that we support. You can go with on-prem or you can go on a public cloud. You can control the access, the resource, and the user layer. All of that, you can deploy it on on-prem or on the public cloud. Different hosting capabilities if you go with. So hosting platform, we call it as forklift model. What it means is the simplest form, you have an on-premises data center, you did all your math, you did all the calculations, and as a corporate, you feel that instead of managing it on-premises, it's very expensive, and let's move the entire resources from data center on-prem to public cloud. Now that's called as a forklift model. So you're moving entire data center to customer cloud or to a partner location. I mean, partner cloud. That's forklift. So put your entire infrastructure, the access, the control, the resource layer, and obviously all of this needs to run on a hardware. So hardware will also be owned by the cloud, any of your public cloud. Okay, we are again open on that. Like to go with Azure, fantastic. AWS, fine. GCP, OCI, Oracle Cloud, Radware. You have your own private cloud from Dell or HP or some other vendor. OpenStack, CloudStack, amazing. Go deploy it. It's an open platform, okay, not open source. Ages back, in the IT world, when you say ages back, 20 years back, yeah, things were running on physical servers. Now we are running on virtual machines. Part of the industry is moving to the cloud environment. Not everybody is keen on the cloud, but small, medium companies who do not have multiple data centers across the globe and who will not be able to maintain uh, the DRs and all, they are using the full architecture of cloud. Or some part they'll put it in their data center. Maybe they'll scale down the data center and most of it will use it on the cloud. Do the math on the cost wise, on the performance wise. If it works out, why not? You can always go with a hybrid model. A physical model is almost gone except HPC based computing, wherein you need the entire resources for some high-end applications. Otherwise, running the entire OS and the application on the physical machines is highly reduced. Mostly it's with the virtual machines nowadays. Hosting platform, you can put it on premises if you own entire on premises, or you can put it on the cloud. As I said, any of your favorite clouds, or you can go with a service provider. Service provider is a transition. So cloud did not come overnight. So before cloud, there were service providers. Let's see what it means is. On-prem, you own the real estate, you own the servers, the rack, the licenses, the security, the building, the cooling. You get the point, okay? Entire thing is owned by you. So infrastructure, rights, resources, hardware, everything we own, corporate owns, we manage it. So that's on-prem. When we say service provider, we don't own it. Instead, it is rented out. So there are companies who own the data center, and within the data center, they rent out some space. 10 by 10, you would like to have some space. You rent out the space. As a customer, you just pay for the space, the electricity bill, the ISP provider. That's it. You get your racks. You put your racks here. You put your rack servers. We would install the operating system and the licenses and the application. So anything and everything within that real estate space of 10 to 100 square feet will be owned by us. You can even put a lock and a key. So 15 years, almost 15, 20 years back, we used to have service providers. Later on, the service providers evolved. They said, where do you want to get your racks and servers? We will provide the rack along with the service. You just get your licenses, bring your own licenses. That's all. Product, you install it, get your own licenses. Over a period of time, the service provider evolved and they said, how do you like to get your licenses? We'll buy the licenses for you. We'll buy it in bulk and we'll pass on the benefit to you. So you just use as a service. So we'll give as a service. What are we giving as a service? We'll give the software as a service, infrastructure as a service, hardware as a service. So data center itself as a service. So then we came up with lots of services. And that's how the service providers over a period of time evolved into public clouds like Azure, AWS, Google Cloud. But the service providers are still there, small and medium companies who have their own hardware, but they would not like to have their own data centers. They would like to rent out some space. Service providers are still there. So between on-premises and public cloud, we do have a middle solution. If that works out, why not? Go deploy it. And Citrix being one of the major products, it's readily available in the marketplace. So if you get into Google Cloud or Azure Cloud, we do have turnkey solutions. If you have all the details with you, like what name, how many devices, how many users, what kind of permissions you would like to give. So if you have all these details, just get into Microsoft Azure platform, get into Marketplace, go for Citrix CVAD, Virtual Apps and Desktop. There will be turnkey solutions. Follow the wizard, give all the inputs, wait for a few hours, and your entire design is deployed, automated with scripts. So we did not go and create the controller, the domain controller, the DNS, the DHCP, not needed. The wizard will ask the questions, give those questions, answers, appropriate answers, wait for some time, things are automatically deployed. So is the solution with the Google Cloud. So is it with AWS. So major of the vendors have it. Then also deploy it on Zen server. Now we call it a Citrix hypervisor, homegrown solution. Or we can go with the vSphere or SCVMM for your Hyper-V environment. AWS will also support on Oracle. Nowadays, we also support the OCI. So as I said, we are open platform. We'll work with any of your favorite cloud and hypervisors. A connection flow. Let's quickly go through that. So the entire connection flow, we have put it into three parts: authentication, enumeration, and session launch. Let's say authentication. So user opens up the portal, okay, and user sees a page wherein user needs to enter the credentials. So user enters the username and the password. And that username and password is sent to the storefront. Now we are discussing the internal user. So storefront, if configured, if storefront belongs to the domain, there are multiple designs. If storefront belongs to the domain, storefront will go and validate your credentials with the domain controller. Once the credentials are validated, if single sign-on is enabled, the same credentials will be sent to the delivery controller. Delivery controller will again go to the domain controller and get the credentials validated. So validated once, validated twice. Now, if the design is such, there are different designs. In this design, the validation is done 2 times. But let's say storefront does not belong to the domain. Then the credential goes to the storefront. Storefront passes the credentials to the controller. Controller will go to the domain controller and get the credentials validated. Now, this design is always there on your on-premises environment. Now, once the credentials are validated, you're authenticated. You get into the next step, enumeration. So under enumeration, what happens? Because the controller in the last page went with the domain controller and got the credentials validated, now the controller needs to put a request. We'll put a request to the database. Now that's where all the configurations are saved. So it asks, hey, you there, database, on port number 1433. Kumar just logged in. What all applications Kumar has access to? Give me the details. So once we put a query to the SQL Server responds back. Kumar has access to these 3 applications and 2 desktops. We get that information. We pass on that information to storefront. Storefront passes that information to the user device. And on the user device, user sees 3 applications and 2 desktops. With that, enumeration is done. Now, user is looking at the page and user is deciding, Kumar is deciding, let's open up Word document. So out of those 5 icons, Kumar clicks on Word. At the moment Kumar clicks on Word, session launch is again divided into 2 parts. Part 1 launch request, part 2 session connections. So Kumar clicks on the Word application, the request goes to storefront, done. Storefront forwards that request to the delivery controller, which is the heart of our design. But the delivery controller, what it does is it again puts a query to the SQL. It says, hey, you SQL there. This guy has put a request for Word application. I would like to know this particular word is hosted on which all servers. So SQL responds that now the Word application is hosted on server number 1, server number 2, and server number 3. So we have server 1, server 2, and server number 3. Now, once the controller gets that response, controller is anyways connected to all the VDAs. If there are 100 VDAs, all 100 VDAs it's connected. If there are 1000 VDAs, all 1000 VDAs it's connected. Now it knows which 3 VDAs it needs to focus. So it puts a probe and it gets a response from the 3 servers. The load, we call it as a load evaluator value, load index. For easier understanding, let's say on server 1, 10 users are connected, server 2, 15 users are connected, server 3, 20 users are connected. This is a value what we get it from server 1, 2, and 3. Now the controller will make a load balancing decision. It picks up the least loaded server, which is server 1. It takes the IP address of server 1, and then it passes that IP address of server 1 to the storefront server. Now the storefront here, at this point in time, it will create a file called as an ICA file, within which the IP address of the least loaded server is inserted. And that address is sent to the user device. Now in real time, in production environment, we would have a NetScaler. There is something called as an STA ticket installed and all, STA ticket created and all. Now that's beyond the scope of this short discussion, so I'm not putting it here. But otherwise, the ICA file is created here, which has the least loaded server's address given to end user's device. Now the user device got the ICA file. With this, the launch request part is completed. Now what happens? On the user device, we have installed Workspace app. Now that's an icon for it. If the Workspace app is not installed, we will not be able to open up the file. It will just show up with some pop-up stating that using which application you would like to open up. But lucky for us, we already installed the Workspace app. It's a plugin. It's a plugin which is installed. Now the plugin will go and open up that .ica file, and it sees the least loaded server's address. So the user's device makes a direct connection with that least loaded server, server one. Let's say this server one. Now, it needs to go and log in, but this time when server one does it, it says, okay, hold on. It puts a request. So 7th step is connecting here. The 8th step is it puts a request to the controller asking, Kumar is trying to log in and launch what application. I would like to know if we have enough licenses for it. So the controller on behalf of the user Kumar and server one, the controller is the one which goes to the license server, step 9, and checks for a valid license. So the license server maintains a table, and let's say it just responds back. Licenses are taken care, and in the table it keeps an entry for which user on which server for what application, just keeps an entry, and it replies back to the controller that license is taken care. The controller responds back to the server that licensing is taken care. You can go with the next step. The next step is where our login script runs. So for Microsoft, we have the group policies, your profiles. Profile files needs to be loaded. Then you have the network settings. Then you have the printer settings, all from Microsoft. And then from Citrix end, we have Citrix policies, Citrix net. If you're using Citrix profile management and also there are so many login steps. It usually takes 5 to 10 seconds, and of all the login steps done, finally the application Word is launched, which is connected like this. And the user is able to see the Word application here. And there's one more connection to the controller. So as an administrator, when we log into our admin consoles, via the controller, we are able to see what is happening on the VDA for each of the users who are connected. Here, user is able to see a Word application. User is able to interact with that application. That's session launch. There are a couple of steps we have missed in the discussion because we have not got NetScaler into picture at all. But ideally, this is how things work. And all of this happens within 5 to 10 seconds. So that's how we go with authentication, enumeration, session launch. Yeah, friend. With this, this particular discussion is done. Continue with another one. Because before we start with another discussion, any questions? Let's continue that. We'll get into module 2. Providing access to the end users. Access module 5, for our case module 2. Now here we'll discuss about storefront. The storefront becomes Workspace app, how it gets connected to the storefront service. Now when we say storefront is a web server. It's a piece of software which is installed on a Microsoft server operating system. Domain joined, not domain joined, however the design is, but it's installed on a Windows server operating system, which is used for initial authenticating the user. There's a page which is prompted to the user, who will enter the username, password, and the domain, and it will go to the controller, and the domain controller we just talked about. It will authenticate. Once authenticated, it will show up the resources. We can also aggregate resources from multiple sites, multiple designs. Then if user has selected some applications as favorites, these would be saved as what we call a subscription. If the user's device from which the user is making the connection doesn't have the Workspace app installed, so Storefront will detect if the Workspace app is installed or not. If not, it will give an option to download the Workspace app, either from the Storefront server itself or from Citrix portal. But it does give you an option. The 2402 LTSR, can go with that. 2016 or above operating systems, 4 gigs of RAM should be minimum. IS is needed, definitely it's a web server. .NET Framework, ASP, PowerShell, and MMC snappings are needed. These are some prerequisites. But if the prerequisites you have not installed, the installer will automatically detect, put a prompt, and get it installed. Recommended, always go with a dedicated server, and we need to secure the connection. So go with TLS 1.2 or higher. So 1.2 or 1.3. These are the security standards for encryption. So once authentication is done, users would see their applications under apps and desktop tabs. This is how the application looks like. So these are desktop and these are the three applications. You might have access to 20 different applications. And let's say you are using 5 applications on a regular basis. So there is a star button, click on the star, and that would be your favorites. It should be showed on your dashboard, on your homepage. If you go to the apps, you might have 20, 30 different applications. So desktop, you might have 10 different desktops. But on the dashboard, you are just seeing 4 applications. So something of your favorites. And Storefront is an independent product. What it means is Storefront can get integrated with your CVAD multiple deployments. You might have CVAD 7.5, LTSR version 7.6, or a current release, the 2205, and all of these, some 10 applications from here, 5 applications from here, and another 5 applications from here. So from 3 different deployments, all the applications can be aggregated. And on one storefront page, you can see all 20 applications. That's possible. Storefront has its own lifecycle, its own upgrade versions and all. And it's an independent product within the CVAD design. In the CVAD design, it can get integrated into multiple portals. Otherwise, if you have multiple sites in your environment, then we need to go with multiple storefront servers, multiple URLs. Oh, that's a big problem in large companies. So we would like to consolidate the storefront. That's that consolidation, absolutely fine. So it aggregates the resources across multiple sites. Farm is a term which we used to use in XANAPP 6.5 and before, very old name. Sites. Site is a name which encompasses all the layers, what we discussed in a couple of slides back. So all the layers together, it's called as site. So internal or external user puts a request, the request comes to Storefront, Storefront goes and gets your application from one of the site. The applications are from some other site, it will go to those sites and get those applications enumerated and then launch. I have direct authentication. If the storefront belongs to the domain, storefront takes the credentials and it will directly go to the domain controller and get it validated. Now for that, it needs to be in the same domain. Only that way it can have a trust built up. This is a default option. But let's say if your storefront server is not a part of your domain, then it doesn't have a trust relation with the domain controller. Then we call it as indirect authentication, or we call it as an XML-based authentication. Either of the names is absolutely fine. I agree, both the names. In this case, Storefront submits those credentials to your controller. Controller is the one which will go to the ADM and get the credentials validated. In other words, this is the design. So if the storefront belongs to the domain, the user puts the credential goes to the storefront goes to the controller, domain controller, and gets it validated. Most of the time, storefront does not belong to a domain. It's a workgroup machine. And then the credentials are passed on to the controller. Controller will go to the domain controller and get the credentials validated. Once authentication is done, we move on to the enumeration and session launch process. That's exactly what is our up here presentation. So one is on direct authentication. This is an indirect authentication. Wherein storefront takes a credential, goes to the controller and gets the credentials validated. Now in this case, storefront doesn't belong to the domain, so direct authentication does not. We call this as an indirect authentication or call it as an XML-based authentication. Because from the user to the storefront, it's HTTP, public protocol we cannot change. But storefront to internal servers, we can use our own protocol, and we just use a lightweighted XML protocol, which only carries the absolute data, which is the credentials. So header, footer, lots of load which comes up with HTTP payload is not used for internal communications. So that's why it's called as a XML-based authentication. And then we have workspace app. Previously, we used to call it as receiver, and even before that, we used to call it as setup plugin for hosted apps, online plugin. Of very old versions, we used to call it as program neighborhood agent and all. Now, the whole idea is because Citrix communicates in a proprietary protocol called as ICA. To understand this protocol, you need to have some kind of translator, some kind of agent workspace app. So today we call it as a workspace app. It's a small piece of software. I think nowadays it's around 100, 150 MB. Previously, it was just 10, 15 MB, but over a period of time, it also grew in size for a lot of features it supports. Install it on the device from which you are getting connected. For different operating systems, we have different variants of it. If you're running from an Android, go to the Play Store, download it. If you have Windows, again, go to the Windows Play Store, download it, or from Citrix portal, you can download an exe file. If you're using Mac, download it from the related port. For Linux, for Windows, we've got different operating systems, different devices. We have different flavors. Install it. And once the Workspace app is installed, it would be able to understand the proprietary ICA protocol. Nowadays, we call it as HDX, but it understands our protocol. It gives us a window to log in, get the applications enumerated, and launch the resources. Is that not what the web used to do? Web also does that. So either through a web or through an application, we can run it. But end of the day, the application is needed for communicating with your media machines. Without Workspace app, we cannot launch the applications. At least a HTML5 version is needed. So there are different variants. If you are connecting through a browser, the plugin is called as receiver for web. So when you are using a web browser for authentication, enumeration, and launching the application, we need receiver for web. If you're not connecting via web, so there is an application called as Workspace app. You install that, it opens up a window of itself, kind of an application. And there it prompts for a username and the password. You need to enter those credentials and we can log in. So that's a proper Workspace app. For some reason, you're not able to install the Workspace app on the user device. No permissions, maybe it's a thin client, some reason. Then we can fall back for Workspace app for HTML5, which is a plugin which is embedded within the browser. And within the browser, we would be able to open up the desktop or the applications. Not as a separate window, but within your Chrome or your Edge or any of our favorite browsers, Firefox, Safari, or not. But HTML5 is usually used as a last option. But over a period of time, the latency and the bandwidth of the internet connection has become much mature, much high speed networks we have with less latencies, and most of the time we prefer HTML5 based access. Yeah, previously it was considered as a fallback. Now HTML5 is a main plugin for us. So Workspace app and HTML5 client. So users can browse a storefront. They can go to a URL. Administrators can direct different users to different URLs. If the device does not have a client, the Workspace app, we can fall back to HTML5. Or the user can go to the URL, download the app, install the app, and then they would be able to log in via the app. So if application can be installed, that's what we prefer, recommended. Can't be installed, no worries, you can still get into web-based access using HTML5 client, web-based client in the simplest form. So that's about a short discussion on storefront. Let's see. Leave master images. Now that's on the storefront, but let's say if you want to install the product, install the controller, what are the prerequisites that we need to take care? So I'll quickly go through some prerequisites. It's called as pre-deployment consideration. So even before we can deploy Citrix CVAD, what are things that should be already ready in the environment? So that's pre-deployment considerations. Licensing, the communication, the port numbers, the protocols that needs to be opened up on the firewall, the core components of the Citrix component that needs to be installed. Something called as a FlexCast management architecture. We'll see that here. And some decision making on redundancy so that we can avoid a single point of failure. Let's see that. You said pre-deployment considerations. What we mean by that is, before I can install the Citrix CVAD, I need to make sure my supporting infrastructure, like my Active Directory is already installed, is in place. My DHCP is in place for different scopes. My DNS is in place for resolution, both forward and reverse lookup, mostly forward. And Microsoft licensing is in place. So make sure all of this is configured. Mostly it should be already have an environment. And within this infrastructure, you can go ahead and create an OU so that you uniquely structure your environment. If you can create an OU called as Citrix, and within Citrix India, within India, you can create Bangalore. Within Bangalore, Manyata Tech Park. And within Manyata Tech Park, you have different projects. Within the projects, the desktop OU, the VDM machines on the server, the random machines. Create a neat categorization. That way, as administrators, if any restrictions or any permissions or policies needs to be applied, we should be able to apply it on the OU level. We should be able to fine grain our environment and maintain it. So create separate OUs for your Citrix environment, separate out your infra like desktops and applications. Create a different OU for test bed. That way, ever going testing, we can always do it in an isolated OU whose permissions or whose GPUs will not affect the production. Same is the case with the DNS. It's already put up here. We're just reiterating that you need to have DNS properly configured. So it's the case with your DHCP. Because with Citrix, using something called as one master image will create tens and hundreds and thousands of machines. So when we create those machines, we call it as provisioning of those machines. We're not able to go and give static IP addresses, practically not possible. So at the time, DHCP will come for rescue. It will issue those IPs, okay, the network settings. So get DHCP in place. That's the whole idea. And when we go and create these machines, so from master, when we create multiple machines to which the users need to connect, we need to give some meaningful name. So come up with some standard naming convention. FLT stands for Fault Fort Lauderdale Data Center. We can go with HYD, Hyderabad. Windows 2016. We are able to make that. It's a desktop operating system. And 010203. But this is from the finance department. Windows 11. It's a static machine. So by looking at the name, we are able to make out. Imagine if I give a name AB12C5. It absolutely doesn't make any sense. So try to give a name which is easy to pick up and easy to analyze and make out what that particular desktop, that particular name is all about. Maybe on the server role, maybe on the geographical location or the operating system, come up with some logic which ourselves and our colleagues can connect with. Now, certificate authority. Now, CA for encrypting and decrypting the traffic, we need certificates for public-based communication. For external communication, always go with public CA, like VeriSign, you have Thwate, we have GeoTrust, or you have so many vendors. You can go and pick one of your favorites. For all connections coming from outside, from the internet till your data center. Now, within the data center, when you have tens and hundreds and even thousands of VMs or thousands of machines, we need not, it's entirely up to you, we need not go to a public CA. Instead, we can make one of our server as a CA. Like how a Windows server can be made as a DNS, a DHCP, a file server, a domain controller, roles and features, use that amazing feature and make the server as a CA, certificate authority. From where you will generate certificates. Generate something called CSR, will generate the root certificates, the private certificates, the intermediate certificates, public key, private key. There's a lot of concepts on it. The whole idea is generate it. Internally, you go with your own self-signed certificate. That way, internal communication is all secure. End-to-end secured. It goes with the latest standards of zero trust. That's a buzzword. Zero trust, which means we absolutely do not trust you. No device is trusted. Internal, external, encrypt everywhere. We can go with that because nowadays we have so much of resources. 15, 20 years back, yeah, we had less resources. At that time, encrypting, decrypting itself, we used to think, if you encrypt and decrypt, okay, it is going to consume 5 or 10% of the CPU resources. Today, it will not even consider 0.5% of your consumer-grade CPU resources. Because the CPUs are nowadays multi-generation ahead of what we used to have. So end-to-end encryption is just another communication, let's say, for today. So the good practice is go with end-to-end encryption. Internal CS can issue the certificate for your internal computers, and pushing these certificates is also much simpler with a group policy. You can just push it to all your domain members. Either with SSL or TLS, these are the two amazing standards. Use either of them and secure your connections. Group policies. Again, create OUs. Like here we have created an OU called Citrix. We have New York. There we have endpoints, management, servers, VDA. Under VDA, we have desktops, remote PCs, servers. Maybe under servers, again, we'll have 2016, 2019, 2022, 2025. Within that, again, we might have different locations. Never know. So these are neatly segregated views. That way, applying permissions on the group policy level, GPUs, for managing becomes much easier, much simpler, much granular. Firewalls, what's some protocols that we need to take care of? The endpoint device makes a secure connection. So obviously, it's 443 that needs to be opened up from the device to the storefront. Storefront, if it's connecting with your AD authentication, 389 for I think for unsecured LDAP. Secured LDAP, it should be 3636. Storefront connects with your controller, again 443 or port 80. XML, we talked about XML. XML will share the same port 80. That's all. The controller goes to the AD to get the credentials validated, similar ports. Controller goes to the license server, 7279 for check-in and check-out of license, 27,000 for the initial communication. Controller goes and talks to your SQL server, so 1433 on TCP. Controller goes and communicates with your VDA, again secure 443, otherwise port 80. The users who are connected, they would connect on 1494, that is for your IC or HDX. 2598 is another port for session reliability. There's a concept called session reliability we'll be using. But the whole idea is the user makes a connection to the VDA on 1494. Now, whichever hypervisor you're connecting, accordingly, you'll have a different port numbers. If you're connecting to Citrix, a Zen server, call it a Citrix hypervisor, it's 80 or 440. If it's VMware, if it's Azure Portal, if it's Nutanix, accordingly, the ports will change. Do you get the point? So the controller goes and communicates with all the different components. Because we would be on a hypervisor, we would be running tens and hundreds, sometimes thousand virtual machines. These physical servers will be limited with 2 or 4 ports, physical ports. So for networking, VLAN based separation is always good. That way we have minimal traffic on within the VLAN's security to a point. Okay? It also gives us security. And with hundreds and thousands of virtual machines and applications, networking becomes complex. So with VLAN, we should be able to segregate it. So your desktop and applications will be on one VLAN, infra will be on another VLAN, storage will be on another VLAN. But end of the day, all these machines will be connecting to the same physical interface. So one interface, you can use 4094. There are 4096, but usable 4094 ports. So 4094 VLANs you can create. With SDC concepts, software defined network, SDN. Okay? SDN concepts with overlay and underlay concepts and all, one port, we can have 16 million of them. Beyond the scope of the discussion, but just to give an idea, we call it as VXLAN. So VLAN 4094, VXLAN 16 million, one single port. So the high density, high consolidations. Now the database itself, you need to have 3 databases. We call it as site, logging, monitoring. Now, site database is where all our configurations and real-time stats are saved. Logging database is where all administrators' activity is saved. So which administrator, the junior, the senior, myself, okay? When did we log into what kind of console and what kind of activities we did? All of that is logged into a different database. We call it as logging database. We call it as configuration logging database. Then when the users connect to the applications, which user connected at what time, how long they were connected, what were the resources, what were the EXEs which they launched, from which browser they launched, what was their IP address from which they launched, which port number they connected, you get the point. All these statistical values are all saved on your monitoring database. What of the expected size for the database? Site database, we're talking about. So if you have 1,000 users and some 50 applications, 31 MB. MB is very, very less. Nowadays, the hard drives are in TB. After MB, we have GB, and after GB, we have TB. So it's just very minuscule expectations. So even if you have 1 lakh users, 200 applications, not even a GB of memory is needed. Average, and these are not realistic numbers. Average we have taken from those solutions of Citrix has deployed. 40,000 VDIs, somewhere around 400, 450. Again, less than 1 GB. 40,000 of them. Still, the storage uses 400, 500 MB. That's it. So The storage is not in GPs, as we might think. Now, licensing part. So for Windows Server, you need a KMS license for the infrastructure component. If you are running those machines on a VDA, then you need the RDS license for the server because multiple users will be connecting to those here. Multiple users will be connecting to the Windows Server. So you need the remote desktop services license. If it's a desktop machine, then we need a license VDA covered by SA. The reason being, Microsoft says that desktop operating system was meant for physical laptops and desktop. If you're running it as a virtual machine, then you need to buy an additional license. So licensing, work out with Microsoft for however your licensing requirements are and get those compliance in place. Application licensing, again, talk to the application vendor. Some application vendor says that if you're logging from one device, we call it as endpoint instance, from this particular laptop, if I'm launching Word application 3 times, and Word 1 launches on server 1, Word 2 launches on server 2, and Word 3 launches on server 3. Microsoft says that that's absolutely fine. It's the same user 1 from the same machine, same endpoint, but the Word application 3 applications launched in 3 different servers. That's right, one license. And you're not going to charge them. But that's with Microsoft Word. Maybe you're using App X from some third party vendor. He says, no, same device, but if you have launched that application 2 times, that's 2 times, and it might be connected to the same server or different server, however it is. If you have launched 2 instances, instance-based license, pay for 2 licenses. Okay, so there are application licensing vendor to vendor, it changes. There is no universal logic for it. Go talk to your application vendor and however the licensing are, take care of it. Then we have Citrix licensing, which we will see it in some time. The controller side. So the controller is also called as a broker because it brokers the connection between the user's request and the least loaded server, which is in the backend. It also does the load balancing. It manages the power of your virtual machines running on a hypervisor. So a good practice is always have at least 2 or more controllers for redundancy purposes. Now, controllers are located in the data center or wherever the VDAs are. So if the VDAs are in Singapore, the controller will also be in Singapore because that way controlling them would be much easier without much traffic. So wherever the VDAs are, that's where the controllers and the needed components would also be placed. So that's the whole idea. So we have something called multiple zones and side channel. We have limited time, so we're not able to discuss it. But the whole idea is wherever your VDAs are, near to that, keep the controller because you need lots of data exchange. Installing options. You can go with autorun and install it, or you have a setup.exe file, or you can go with silent installations with switches on command line. Command line, you can do that. 2016 and above operating systems, standard enterprise, or better, you can also go with the core edition. You can also support that. .NET framework, PowerShell, C++ libraries, these are the prerequisites. Go get them installed. Very old versions, MetaFrame and the presentation servers, 15, 20 years back. Yeah, if these prerequisites were not installed in a proper sequence, the installation usually failed. But nowadays, thanks to the development world, they have made the installation much, much simpler. Even if the prerequisites are not installed, we need not worry about it. Just go with the installation. It will automatically pick these files either from your roles and features or from the ISO package of the CVAD file. It will pick up these prerequisites and it will automatically install. Site requirements. Every site at least needs 1 controller. Minimum is recommended is 2. If you need N, go with N+1. So that we avoid single point of failures. Now, once the controller is installed, these are fantastic services, which gives the entire solution. We have a bunch of services and their explanation here. So the same services, we can also see it like this. These are all the services. So we have the site database, we have the monitoring database, we have the configuration logging database. For monitoring database, we have a service called as monitoring service. How simple, okay? How thoughtful of the name. Monitoring service goes and puts a query to your monitoring service database. Configuration logging database. Now that's where your all admin activities are saved. Administrators activities on the consoles are saved. We do have a dedicated database to see which admin is doing what. And we have a service, dedicated service for it. It's called as configuration logging service. 99% of the communication is like this. If you see, there is another error, 1%. Again, I'm just coming by that 1%. It need not be 1%, but the whole idea is this arrow to database is your metadata. So here, metadata uh, data is saved on the site database, but all your actual logs, actual events, actual data is saved on the dedicated databases. Then, if you remember the 5 layers, user makes a connection to storefront. Storefront communicates to the controller. So all these services are on controller, storefront to controller. So we should have a service called a storefront service. There we go. We have a storefront service. Now, once the storefront connects to the controller goes and gets the credentials validated with an AD. So we should have a service called as AD. Here we have. So on the AD, we are identifying the user's identification. So AD, identity service. The controller goes and also talks to the host. So we have a host service, irrespective of which host it is. Maybe you're running on some hypervisors, then some VMware, Nutanix. So we have a host service talk to. It also goes and connects to the database, or the database itself is here. Okay, now there is a service for connecting to the VDA machines. So the controller goes and communicates with the VDA. So we have a service called as broker service to connect to the VDA. Then there are too many administrators, more than 5-10 administrators. We need to give different permissions. To delegate the permissions, we have a service called as delegated administrative service. Right? Permissions are delegated. These administrators, we need to go and configure things. So for configuring the console, we have a service called as configuration service. All of these activities needs to be monitored, and in-depth monitoring, we call it as analytics. So we have an analytics service. At times, or usually suggested on a weekly or a daily basis, run some probing tests to make sure your environment, your site is running proper. We call it as environmental test. We are testing our environment. Some 200 plus tests are there. Environmental test service. The whole idea of the CVAD is from one master image, we create a number of machines, and there is a fantastic service for it. For provisioning of multiple machines, we call it as MCS, machine creation services. So using some logic, we should be able to remember it over a period of time. These are the services. Then you have the app library, orchestration, and trust. Most of the time, they are not used until invoked by a third-party tool for integration with APIs or some kind of automation that you would like to do, or trusting other controllers or failover and all. Then the trust service comes into picture. We have config synchronization and high availability service for a local database. We call it as LHC. I think it should be in the further slides we'll discuss there. But these are all the services we actually saw here. Let's see. So when things are working proper, you have the controller going and talking to your site database. So in the controller, we have 3 services. We have a broker service, we have a config synchronizer service, and we have secondary broker service. So when things are running fine, the VDA machines and the storefront would communicate to your controller, to the broker service. The broker service will go to the database, put a query, and get a response. Whatever response it gets, every 2 minutes, without fail, every 2 minutes, the broker service will update the synchronizer service of the changes. The synchronizer service will take that update and inform to the secondary broker service. The secondary broker service will take that update and write it in the local DB. Now, this is a SQL Express. Now, we might think the broker service can directly go and write it here, but that's not allowed. The reason being, if broker service did that, and if the broker service goes down, how it went here, then both site database and the local database will not be reachable. And for modular reasons and for integration with other tools and all, we have different services, each service doing a specific job. Now, let's say the controller's connection with the database failed. some network issues, or the database itself went down. Then there is another service which is running in the backend. It's called as high availability service. High availability service. So HA service is watching the controller, the broker service, and the secondary broker service. If the broker service is unable to reach the database, the HA service will promote the secondary broker service as a leader, so that all further communication from your VDAs and storefront will go to the secondary broker service, which will go to the local database, and it will fetch some data for running your environment. But this is a kind of a big topic. We usually talk for more than half an hour. We have short time. Just to tell you that even if the database goes down, the whole point is even if your database goes down, your environment does not fail. There is a last resort called as local host caching. So part of the database is saved on your local DB. And with that local DB data, your environment can still run. And once your database connection is back, then it will all get synced. Even if the database is not reachable, we should still be able to run our environment. Now, always deploy your controller on dedicated servers. Don't share it with any other servers. Minimum 5 gigs of RAM, 800 MB of hard disk should be more than enough. For Studio, if you're installing, put an additional 1 gig of RAM, Director another 2 GB, storefront. Not recommended, but let's say if you would like to install storefront for POCs, colleges, uh, small companies can't afford another server, and maybe put an additional 2 GB and storefront can also be put into them, including a license server for another 2 GB. But ideally, the storefront and your license server should be dedicated. If not, just take care of some resources and they can sit together. They can work together. What's a desktop site? All of this is a desktop site. A site is a combination of your access, control, resource layer running on your hardware layer so that users can connect to the applications which are running on your resource layer. And that's what is a site all about. It consists of all of these so that users can access your VDAs. In the site database, configuration, logging database, monitoring database has again come back. All your configurations, session data, connection information is in your site database. All administrative activities, we have a different database. All historical and user level activities are saved into monitoring database. All three databases are needed. Most of the time, all three databases are on the same database server. And then this is a first page, first configuration page that on which we put the database names and the server on which you would like to put these databases. Mostly we put it on the same server. You can also put it on a different server. It's entirely up to us. For management, we have Studio, which is also available on a web-based access nowadays. Director is for monitoring, and we can also go with PowerShell. So this is the initial tool on which we create the machines, the policies, and all some activities for administrators will do it here. Then the rest of the monitoring, troubleshooting, we will all do it from the director. Things which are not available on these two consoles, we do it from the PowerShell. And even those options which are available can do it on PowerShell. Example, let's say there are 1,000 options. Again, I'm just making up the number, it's not a real number. If there are 1,000 options across the globe, most of the administrators, let's say they are using 100 options on a daily basis. So those 100 options are available on your Studio and on your Director. So there are still not many options which are available. It's not a day-to-day activity for us, but when needed, we can get into PowerShell and we can execute those commands. Rather, anything and everything we do it on these GUI console in the backend, it gets converted as a PowerShell script and gets executed. So PowerShell integration with your CVAD environment is very tight integration. Redundancy considerations, let's quickly go through that. If you don't plan a redundancy, what happens? So as a good designer and as a good administrator, always make sure to avoid single point of failure. Storefront, at least two. Let's tell that two. Controller two, delivery controller two. SQL Server, however, the SQL HA is to be configured. You have replications, you have mirroring, and I think replication, mirroring, cluster, some method. So it's some method wherein If one SQL server fails, you still have a way to get to another SQL server. License server, you can put it on a cluster. There is a special documents for HA cluster uh, for Microsoft clustering. Otherwise, most of the time, the license server, it's a virtual machine. We take a clone of it and we shut down the clone. The live one keeps running. And if there are issues with the live one and we are not able to fix it, we usually shut it down and switch on the backup shutdown copy. For redundancy, the simplest plan is if you need N, you go with N+1 design. If your infra is very large and frequently things go down, you can even go with N+2 design. So if you need 10, you can go with 10+1 or 10+2 design. That way, even if one or two devices goes down, you can still run your environment. Now, impact if there is no redundancy. You have not planned a redundancy. Every device is just a single device. And things fail. Then what happens? If your license server fails, absolutely fine. We get into a 30 days grace period. 30 days is a very long time. You can install a new operating system, add it to the domain, put all the policies, install the license, upload the license file, and things will all work fine. I think coming April this year, Citrix will be stopping issuing the license files, and we need to register with cloud license. Some date going on those lines. Till then, license server goes down, you have 30 days grace period. The controller goes down. Machines can't be power managed. Site becomes unmanageable, which is we administrators cannot log in and do any kind of activities on Studio, PowerShell, or Director. No administrative activities. Workspace app, which is installed on the user devices, will not be able to enumerate the application. Maybe they can authenticate, but they will not be able to see the applications. But if the users have already launched an application, that would absolutely work fine. That will not get affected. Because after that, controller is not needed. If your database goes down, again, you can't do power management, site becomes unmanageable, none of the consoles will work. We can't do any kind of activities. Local host cache can still survive and broker the connections. Admins, we can't do the job, but the brokering and all will still work. We just saw that the secondary broker service, the broker service in that part. If the storefront fails, storefront itself fails when the user enters company.com or storefront.company.com URL, the URL will not resolve. So users cannot authenticate. Without authentication, enumeration will not happen. Without enumeration, they cannot launch an application. But if they already launched an application, those applications will work. New launches will not work because there is no interface to connect. Okay? So that's the whole idea of storefront. So when you go with redundancy, even if one device fails, you have another device. And if you want to load balance that, you have an amazing load balancer from Citrix. That's Netscaler. So user's connection will come to the Netscaler. Netscaler will decide which of these two nodes, which of these two servers should serve the application. You can go with active-active, you can go with active-passive. It's entirely up to us. Most of the time, we don't go with active-passive, we go with active-active. Maybe if each one of them can handle 100 connections, we'll put a limit on 50, such that if one of the device goes down, this 50 can be added here, and still it should be able to serve 100 connections. Logic like that is what is used if you go with active-active. Just make sure if things go wrong, the other surviving servers can still take up the load. Just make sure of that design and things should work. See, we almost have another 20 minutes to go. I have another two discussions to finish. Let's just give me a quick minute.
Hi, Gopi, all cool.
Yeah, all good. Just maybe with another two modules, I think another 10 minutes, we should be able to finish it. Master images. When we say master image, quickly discuss the role of a master image, the VD agents, and some settings of it. So when we say master image, Let's say there are 200 users to whom I need to give a Windows 10 machine with a bunch of applications installed. So instead of me going and creating 200 different machines, I can create one machine. We'll call it as a master, and that master will be cloned 100 times. Now that 100 times cloning, so we need to build the master image properly. So as an administrator, I'll get the operating system which is needed. Usually I'll ask the team which is requesting for these 100 images. So which operating system do you need? Okay, Windows 10. All right, we'll put Windows 10. Now we'll Windows 11. Windows 10 is now gone. What are the applications required? PowerPoint, Excel, SAP, correct. Get those applications. So load the operating system, load the applications, build the master. So as an administrator, I'll build the master. Once master is built, the VD agent also needs to be installed. So I'll install the VD agent. There are two amazing technologies from Citrix. One we call it as MCS and another one PVS. There are use cases for both the concepts, but mostly MCS is used. So that comes inbuilt with the product, the controller what we install. So using MCS as a concept, this master will be provisioned 100 times. It's kind of a clone. But they all have unique IP addresses, all have unique host names, unique domain accounts created. But that's where the OU, what we created in the previous slides, we checked the DNS, the DHCP, all of them infrastructure is pre-created and including the name what we need to give. So give some name // or hash. Okay, it will come up with a sequence of numbers. Right? Multiple machines are created. The usual requirements for master image. The VDA will be installed on the master. The primary role of the VDA is for the users to connect to those servers. So the VDA can be installed on a server or a desktop. So your master image can be a server operating system or a desktop operating system, on which multiple machines will be created. A server operating system 2016 and above. It can also be a Linux operating system. So these flavors we support: Ubuntu, CentOS, Red Hat, and SUSE Linux. For the desktop, the Windows 10 is now gone. So we take out Windows 10, Windows 11. And from the desktop operating system, same desktop, Ubuntu, CentOS, Red Hat, and SUSE Linux. So both operating systems are supported. Install the video machine, create the master image, and from the master image, create a number of machines for our support. And these master images needs to be connected to the controller for communication. This just yeah, that's a small discussion. Just to know that the VDA is the product which needs to be installed and the master image to be created. Let's see monitoring. Director. A director is another console which we administrators use to monitor the user's activity. It's a web-based console, mostly used by help desk, may not be confined to help desk. Other administrators can also use it. It's included with all the editions of CVAD. Monitoring and fixing issues, troubleshooting your sites, that's the main purpose of it. Connection issues, performance issues, integration into Netscaler, all of these options are available. OS needed to install it 2016 and above. Because it's a web-based console, IS is needed and you need .NET framework. And it should have access to the controller. Mostly it is installed on the controller, but it's not mandate. So we can also install the director on a separate server. But ideally, director is installed along with the controller. Otherwise, controller can be separate, your director can be separate. Larger organizations, you can install director on multiple servers and load balance it. If you see where it is available in a architecture level, it's on your control layer. We have the domain controller, we have the license server. We can install the director on a separate server or the controller on a separate server. And the services will reduce communicate. Or both of them, most of the time, both of them are installed on the same service. And you would have a SQL server. The console itself would look something like this, wherein we can see how many users are connected, how many sessions got failed. So we actually expanded. How many connections failed in the last 1 hour, how many users are connected, what's the average login time. Click on it and we should be able to see more details about those average time. About the status of the controller, the database, the licenser, their health. It's an amazing tool. So much of information in one console. Now, previously, all this data was still available, but they were spread across multiple locations you need to collect. Now it's all in one unified dashboard. Let me just quickly connect to a demo lab. We don't have one. Okay. Let me quickly see now. It's not yet ready. Yes, that's okay. Yes, we are almost done with the discussions, so we'll.
Thank you, Gopi, for a clear, practical, and insightful session. We truly appreciate you breaking down app desktop virtualization in such a easy way. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. Your engagement and questions made this session even more valuable. For those who joined late and would like to revisit the concepts, recording will be available on the talk sections of edForce website. If today's session helped you gain clarity, we encourage you to share it with your teams and continue learning.